Hello, namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi has finally been laid to rest. But conspiracy theories about his chopper crash are taking on a life of their own. The United States is being blamed by Iranians and their allies in Russia. Do these charges hold water? We'll discuss that. On the other side of the world, China is conducting what it calls punishment drills near Taiwan, making the first week in office for the new president way more eventful than he perhaps hoped for. The world over, the chip war has intensified, with governments offering billions of dollars in subsidies. In India, the stock markets have hit a new record, even though foreign investors are pulling out money. We'll explain why that's happening. In the Israel-Hamas war, a new graphic video of the hostages is out. These are women soldiers in the IDF. In the UK, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak announces snap polls. Is this a misfire or a masterstroke? French President Emmanuel Macron has taken a very long flight to New Caledonia to restore peace after days of rioting, but can he deliver what the protesters are asking for? Kenyan President Ruto is on an expensive state visit to the US. Can Joe Biden help him beat the critics at home? In Thailand, the Prime Minister is in danger of being ousted. We'll tell you why and the story you absolutely shouldn't miss. How to Conquer the World, the Cockroach Survival Guide. The headlines first. South Korea, Japan and China to hold their first trilateral summit since 2019. The South Korean president will meet Chinese Premier Li Qiang and the Japanese Prime Minister in Seoul on Monday. The summit announcement comes a day after Beijing reportedly summoned South Korean and Japanese diplomats to discuss Taiwan. Norway to close its border to Russian tourists from the 29th of May. This was the last direct access for Russians to Europe's border-free Schengen area. This year alone, more than 5,000 people with tourist visas have crossed the border from Russia, and angry Moscow has promised to respond to Norway's move. Amid escalating trade tensions, Benin closes its river crossing with Niger. In recent weeks, Benin and Niger have sparred over the movement of goods. Since the military seized power in Niger last July, ties between the two West African neighbors have been frosty. A stage collapses at an election rally in Mexico, killing at least 9 people. 50 others were injured in the accident. Authorities say a strong gust of wind caused the stage to collapse. Mexico goes to polls on 2nd June. And believe it or not, Joe Biden's team is looking to hire a meme manager. His re-election campaign posted a job opening for a content and meme manager. The US president wants to woo young voters ahead of the November election.
بس که تو روز التماس هر شهید کرد
Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi has been laid to rest. The scenes were similar to what played out in the last 2 days. Thousands of people flooded the streets as the convoy reached its final stop of Mashhad. In the last 3 days, it has travelled to 5 different cities in Iran. Mashhad is the hometown of Ebrahim Raisi. His remains have been buried there. Iran says officials from 68 countries were present for the funeral.
وزیر امور خارجه الله مالک رحمتی استان ایران و جهانید همه با هم
And with that, the 3-day funeral ceremony came to a close. Now, the public discourse is shifting focus from what happened to why it happened. That's what people are asking. Why did the president's chopper crash? The investigation is still on, but a new theory or a new charge is gaining traction, that the Americans are to blame, that US sanctions caused the helicopter crash. This claim is being pushed by some Iranians and their allies in Russia. They say, had it not been for US sanctions, the Iranian president would have been alive. You could argue it either way. But when this sentiment takes hold, it further poisons an already difficult relationship between the US and Iran. So why is this theory being propagated? Who exactly is doing it, and what do they stand to gain? And what is the US saying or doing about it? The idea to pin blame on the US was floated soon after the crash, when Iranians saw the pictures of the wreckage and they realized that Raisi and team were flying in an American chopper, a Bell 212 helicopter. Iran bought it when the Shah was still in power, so more than 45 years back. The chopper is named after its manufacturer, a company called Bell Helicopter. It was first launched in 1968 and it was discontinued in 1999, this chopper, but the Iranian president was still being flown in a chopper that was no longer in production. Raisi's helicopter crashed on Sunday. The very next day, on Monday, Russia's foreign minister spoke, that's Sergei Lavrov. He was quick to blame the US.
By implementing the sanctions that include ban on supplies of service parts for the US-made aviation products, they put people's lives at risk. The Americans disown that, but actually, other countries under sanctions do not receive service parts for US-made hardware, including aviation.
US sanctions are taking lives. Lavrov blames America for this tragedy, but obliquely. Here's someone else who's doing it directly. Mohammad Javad Zarif, former foreign minister of Iran, he called the US quote-unquote a culprit. He confirmed that Iran was unable to get aviation parts all because of American sanctions. In fact, let me quote further from his statement. This is what Zarif has said. These will be recorded in the list of US crimes against the Iranian people. So Zarif is calling it a US crime, and his view has many takers in Tehran, including some influential voices. Is there merit in this charge? It is a fact that Iran cannot access aviation parts, civilian or military. And this has been the case since 1979. That's when the Iranian Revolution took place. After that, Iran's supply lines were cut. The commercial airlines have some of the oldest fleet in the world. The planes are more than 25 years old. That's a quarter of a century. Iran still operates planes like McDonnell Douglas MD-83, Airbus A300 and A310. The rest of the world has long retired these planes, but Iran still flies them. And where do they get their parts from? Well, they have only two options. Either cannibalize other planes for parts, or if possible, reverse engineer them using materials that are available locally. The Bell choppers are patched up in a similar way. So indeed, the sanctions are an impediment, but could Iran not have found alternatives in the last 45 years? Should they not have built or sourced substitutes? The regime in Tehran must answer these questions. If the planes were too old to service, why were they not replaced? Why was an old chopper used to ferry the president? Should they not have sought help from their allies like Russia and China? They could have sourced parts from these countries. Why didn't they? Then there are questions on the circumstances leading to the crash, like why was the chopper allowed to fly in a dense fog cover? Couldn't they have waited for the fog to lift? Did the pilot think about taking a detour or using a different route altogether? And most importantly, why were all these leaders sitting in the same chopper? Two more helicopters were part of the entourage. They made it back safely. It's not clear if they were occupied. And so far, Iran has not been able to answer any of these questions. The investigation into the crash is ongoing, so we'll have to wait for the full story to come out, assuming that the full story does come out. But at this juncture, blaming America for the crash is at best a political move to rally support, and at worst, a convenient excuse to evade responsibility. Let's turn to Taiwan now. It was a nervous day for the people of this island. China was breathing down their neck. We're talking about military drills, or as Beijing is calling it, punishment drills. Punishment for what? Democracy, I guess. A new Taiwanese president took charge this week. He's a prominent China hawk. In fact, Beijing calls him a separatist. So these military drills are China's response, a sort of warning to the new regime in Taipei. We're talking about a massive operation here. China has deployed 15 warships, 16 naval police vessels and 42 warplanes. Their defense ministry released a map of this drill. Look at the areas marked in red. That's where China's military practiced, to the north, to the east, to the west and to the south. Basically, China swarmed the island from all sides. Now, a couple of things to note here. Number one, China's military practiced a full-scale attack on Taiwan. They have never done so before. Most Chinese drills have focused on blockades. So this one is clearly an escalation. Number two, the drills are called Joint Sword 2024A. Now, why would you put A after the name if you're planning sequels? So chances are China has more military drills in the pipeline. It's a major test for the new president of Taiwan. His name is Lai Ching-te. Lai took charge on Monday. He used his first speech to send a message to China. He said, "Stop threatening Taiwan." And what does China do? Exactly the opposite. This drill is supposed to challenge Lai's leadership, to test his resolve and character. So did the new president pass? In public, he's made strong statements. Lai says he will stand on the front lines with the army.
I will stand on the front line with all the brothers and sisters from the national army to defend the national peace together. At this moment, international society is paying lots of attention to the democratic Taiwan. And while facing the external challenges and threats, we will continue to defend the values of democracy.
Tough words there. Taiwan also deployed its own military. Fighter jets were scrambled, warships were mobilized, and land units were put on alert. Their Coast Guard ships also sprung to action. Some of them noticed Chinese vessels in the vicinity, so they issued a warning. Change your direction or we will take action.
中国大陆548军舰，这里是中华民国海巡署宜兰舰广播，你的行动将严重破坏台海区域和平、稳定及安全，有造成事端，增加维安及误判风险，请你立即调整航向，如执意进入我。
So Taiwan was ready. And there's a reason for that. Most people expected China to lash out after the inauguration, so this drill was not really a surprise. Just look at Taiwan stock markets. They closed around 0.3% up. No jitters, no attack fears. Having said that, Taiwan must tread carefully because the trajectory is worrying. It all started in 2022. Then US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan. It was the first visit by a top US official in decades. So what did China do? They staged unprecedented military drills. They practiced blockading Taiwan. Thus, a new normal of military activity was established. Now, cut to 2024. China has taken it one step forward. They're not practicing a blockade. They're practicing an attack. So China is getting bolder and bolder. They went from minor drills to blockades and from blockades to simulated attacks. And that's the worry for Taiwan. It's also a message to their allies, the likes of Japan and the United States. Experts say they do have contingency plans if China invades. Those plans focus on Taiwan's east. It's close to Japan and the Philippines, so eastern Taiwan is a natural supply route. You can get military aid and resources into the island. And China knows this, which is why Beijing staged drills in the east as well. It's their way of telling the US, don't get ideas.
This is a powerful punishment for the separatist forces seeking Taiwan independence and a serious warning against interference and provocation by external forces. It is fully in line with international law and practice, and completely justified and necessary.
So what happens next? These drills won't change Taiwan's policy. Their people voted for a China hawk, so their choice is quite clear. No reunification. But the military strategies have to be revisited, especially weapons sales. A lot of US arms are flowing to Israel and Ukraine. That could shift the focus from Taiwan. Plus, can you leave these Chinese drills unanswered? If you do, you could embolden Beijing. And if you don't, you will give them an excuse to escalate. Talk about an eventful first week in office for President Lai. If you had a time machine, what would you do? Well, I've got a suggestion. Go back to 1999 and subscribe to NVIDIA's IPO. We have discussed this company before. NVIDIA, it's a chip maker based in the US. They went public at $12 per share. $12. Do you know what it's worth now? Almost $950 per share. And the crazy thing, it's still going up. NVIDIA have released their quarterly report. Their revenue increased by 262%. We are talking about 3 months here, February, March and April. The market expectation was already very high. They predicted $24.7 billion in revenue. And guess what? NVIDIA beat that expectation. They logged $26 billion in revenue. How did they do that? Mostly thanks to artificial intelligence chips, AI chips. AI requires advanced semiconductors, and NVIDIA is one of the few companies in the world that make them. So their shares are on a roll. NVIDIA is 97% up from January and 200% up compared to May last year, 200% in a year. It's a mind-boggling rise. And like I said, it's not done yet. Many analysts say NVIDIA is now the most important company on the planet. It is America's ace in the chip war. And that war has a new battleground: subsidies. Countries are using billions in subsidies to develop their chip industry, to lead this cutting-edge technology. How much money are we talking about? Almost $380 billion. $380 billion in subsidies, that's how much countries have planned. The US has set aside almost $40 billion, 40. The UK 1.3 billion, France 3.1 billion, India 10 billion, Japan 25 billion, South Korea 55 billion. I know this is a lot of money, but it pales in comparison to China's subsidies. China's subsidies are worth almost $142 billion. So China's goal is quite clear. It wants to lead the chip industry. But how realistic is this goal? Well, experts are divided. NVIDIA and Qualcomm are probably the industry leaders right now, and both are American companies. Some experts say Chinese chips are years behind them. Others say the gap is much closer. So the US is trying to rally its allies. Washington has already stopped selling advanced chips to China. They want their allies to do the same, like Europe, Japan and South Korea. But here's the thing. In this chip race, it's every country for itself. Because we're talking about an economic lifeline. Chips make almost 15% of Taiwan's GDP and 7% of South Korea's GDP. Why would they give up that lead to anyone, even an ally like the US? Today, South Korea announced a new financial package. They're giving $19 billion to the chip sector, mostly in the form of investments.
반도체는 다 알다시피
As we all know, semiconductors are a field where all-out national warfare is underway. Win or lose, that depends on who can make cutting-edge semiconductors first. We need to provide strong support for semiconductors to ensure that our country doesn't fall behind others in the competition.
The targets are overlapping. The US wants to capture 20% of the chip market by 2030. The European Union also wants to capture 20% of this market by 2030. And South Korea wants 10% of this market. I guess the rest will come from Taiwan. So where does this leave other countries? Playing catch up. China is pumping a lot of money into this sector, and slowly it is paying off. Huawei, for example, made their own chips. A 7-nanometer processor. It caught many US officials by surprise. So China's plan is spread across different stages. Invest dozens of billions, dominate production of old legacy chips, meanwhile gather more knowledge, and finally shift to more advanced ones. It's an expensive but robust plan. The question is, how should countries like India respond to this? The West already has a lead, so all they need right now is to stay ahead, to not be complacent. But India's challenge is very different. We have to build from the bottom up. India has a vast talent of engineers and designers, but many of them end up working in Western companies. The key is to retain this talent or to make Western companies invest in India. More focus must be on this, because it's easy to announce billions of dollars and forget about it, but sometimes money alone is not enough. Meanwhile, Indian stock markets are on a high after a few weeks of poll jitters. The bulls are making a comeback. The markets have rebounded. This week, they surpassed $5 trillion in value. And this milestone was achieved in record time. At the end of November 2023, they'd crossed the $4 trillion mark. And now we are in the month of May. So in barely 6 months, Indian markets have gained $1 trillion in valuation. They've added $1 trillion. These are companies listed on the Bombay Stock Exchange, better known as the BSE. It is India's oldest stock exchange. Companies listed on this index are together worth $5 trillion. As of today, only 3 other countries are ahead of India: the United States, China, and Japan. In January this year, India overtook the markets of Hong Kong. It became the 4th largest stock market. So the question is, what is driving this rally? Mostly retail investors, the ones who invest through mutual funds. Those are retail investors by making small contributions every month. Earlier, their participation was modest, but in recent years, more retail investors have entered the markets in India and they're investing bigger sums. In the last 1 year alone, the value of their assets has surged by 44%. Mutual funds now hold almost 9% of all Indian stocks. Again, this is an all-time high. And what does this trajectory tell you? We've listed a few key takeaways. First of all, the changing approach of Indian retail investors. They're willing to take more risks, to make more bets with their savings. And the second point to note is that the markets have a buffer. Thanks to this steady inflow of funds, there's a buffer against sudden shocks, like a mass withdrawal from institutional investors or foreigners. Indian markets are less likely to experience extreme or volatile swings. But here's the flip side to this story. While retail investors are still bullish on India, foreign investors are shifting. They're selling shares in large volumes. Let me show you the numbers from this month. Foreign investors have sold stocks worth over 27,000 crore rupees. That's more than $3 billion US. And this selling or dumping of shares has been happening for weeks now. Since April, global funds have pulled well over $4 billion from India. Investments by FPIs have dropped to a 12-year low. What are FPIs? Foreign portfolio investors, 12-year low. Now, these are foreign individuals, companies or institutions who invest in the Indian stock market. So why are they pulling their money out? One reason is interest rates. They're still high in countries like the US, so investors who want to keep their money safe are putting it in US bonds. Some others are betting on prices to fall. In other words, they're shorting. They're shorting Indian stocks. Now, reports say there are more than 200,000 such contracts. What does shorting a stock mean? It's basically a bet against a company or a stock. If an investor feels that the company's shares are overvalued, they place a bet against the stock. This is what is called a short. So Indian stocks are being shorted. Does it make sense? Well, to some extent it does, because many Indian stocks are overvalued. So investors may be sensing an opportunity and looking to make a quick profit. But such transactions are often short-term in nature. They do not reflect the long-term outlook of neither the Indian stock markets nor Indian companies. And then there is one final factor, which is the Indian election. Some investors are still waiting for the results to come. They will make their next move after the results. And some of the recent sell-off was driven by low voter turnouts in the initial phases. It led to a lot of speculation. Some investors were unsure about the outcome. Well, they won't have to wait for long. In 12 days from now, we'll have the election results. On October 7th, Hamas attacked Israel. They took almost 252 people hostage. 7 months later, more than 100 of these people are still missing, including 5 women soldiers of the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force. Now their families have released a new video. It shows these women in Hamas captivity. Their hands are tied and their faces are bloody. The families hope that this video can build pressure. They want Prime Minister Netanyahu to bring back the hostages immediately. But is that even possible? Is a hostage deal still on the cards? Our next report tells you.
October 7th, 2023. 229 days. That's how long it has been since Hamas attacked Israel and took hostages. 252 people were taken during the attack. 112 have been released. 37 are presumed dead, but nearly 100 hostages remain unaccounted for. They are said to be in Gaza. Hamas hasn't talked about their whereabouts. Israel hasn't been able to rescue them. So their families wait day after day, hoping to hear some news about their loved ones. Now families of hostages have released a new video. It shows 7 female Israeli soldiers. It's graphic footage of their abduction. It shows 7 women. They are all IDF personnel. Their hands are bound. They are lined up against the wall. Some of their faces are bruised. They are being threatened by Hamas. These women were working as IDF observers. They're all 19 and 20-year-olds who were monitoring the border when they were captured. One of these women, Ori Megidish, was rescued by the IDF. She's now in Israel. Another hostage, Noah Marciano, was killed in Gaza. But 5 others are still in captivity. Now this video is not new. It was initially released by Hamas, but the IDF put out an edited version. A few weeks ago, Israel showed the footage to the families of the victims. They were given a copy of it. And now the families have made this video public.
Very, very hard emotionally seeing this video. I've actually seen this footage a few weeks ago for the first time. And I think it really emphasizes how urgent it is to get my little sister and the other young girls and all the hostages back, because we are dealing with people who are acting in such inhuman ways, killing, raping, kidnapping.
The video is an attempt to build pressure on the government. But will Netanyahu budge? After the release of the video, the Israeli Prime Minister did release a statement. He said he was horrified. Netanyahu said negotiators are continuing talks to bring the hostages back home. The families of the hostages even met with senior Israeli leaders. This includes Defense Minister Yoav Gallant and War Cabinet member Benny Gantz. They lobbied for an immediate agreement with Hamas.
We only see in that video a fraction of the horrible things that are going on in their surrounding, in the shelter. She is terrified and wounded. There is fear in her eyes. And she is saying whatever she can. She's begging for her life. The top priority is to bring her home. Bring them all home now.
But is a hostage deal even possible at this point? Right now, ceasefire talks are at a standstill. The last round of talks ended in Cairo without any deal. While Hamas accepted the ceasefire deal, they say that Israel's rejection took talks back to square one. Meanwhile, in early May, Israel began its assault on the southern city of Rafah, a move that has cast a shadow not only on a future ceasefire, but also on the fate of these hostages.
Rishi Sunak loves cricket. He may not look very good at it, but he likes it. We've seen him many times with bat in hand, but this time he was bowling. a googly to his political rivals. On Wednesday evening, Sunak turned up outside his office, number 10 Downing Street. There was quite a bit of rain around, but the Prime Minister went ahead. He announced that he was calling for elections.
The King has granted this request, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July. These uncertain times call for a clear plan and bold action to chart a course to a secure future. You must choose in this election who has that plan.
The optics were not good. Loud music playing in the background, rain all over his suit. None of it looked very appealing, but Sunak had made up his mind. Elections will be held on the 4th of July. It was a surprise to some of his cabinet members. Apparently, even the finance minister did not know. Plus, a lot of Conservative MPs are unhappy. They think Sunak should have waited, maybe called the elections by the end of 2024. So I guess the question is, why did the Prime Minister do it? Well, this is a snap election, meaning it's being held ahead of time. Britain's elections were scheduled for January next year. But Rishi Sunak has moved it up. It's not clear why. One reason could be the economic data. Britain's inflation numbers were published this week. It was around 2.3% in April, a bit lower than what was predicted. Also, Britain has exited a technical recession. Their GDP grew by 0.6% from January to March. That's the highest rate in 2 years, 0.6%. So maybe Prime Minister Sunak thought this is the chance. The economy won't get better than this, so might as well capitalize. Another reason could be leadership challenge. There were rumors of rebellion this month. Apparently, some Conservative MPs were plotting to oust Sunak. But that won't matter now because elections have been called. So Sunak will lead the Conservative Party. Which brings us to the campaign. All parties have hit the ground running. Today, Labour leader Keir Starmer held his first rally. He promised to rebuild the country.
If you want change, you have to vote for it. And if you vote Labour, it's a vote to stop the chaos. It's a vote to turn the page. And it's a vote to rebuild our country together. For a government to leave after 14 years, our country, with living standards worse than when they started, is absolutely unforgivable.
It's a great chance for Keir Starmer. He's not your Tony Blair sort of firebrand leader, but frankly, he doesn't need to be. Conservatives have ruled Britain for 14 years. Ideally, that should have given stability. One party ruling for 14 years. But not in Britain. They've had 5 prime ministers and 7 finance ministers in this time. One of the PM's Liz Truss lasted less than 50 days. So most British voters are quite fed up. They don't need Starmer to be extraordinary. They need him to be boring. And opinion polls support it. They show Labour Party with 41% votes and Sunak's Conservatives at 20%. If these numbers hold, it could be a landslide win for the opposition. The question is, can Prime Minister Rishi Sunak turn it around? Well, his pitch is quite clear. I am the man who guided Britain through crises. First as Finance Minister, then as Prime Minister, and he's got a point there. Just look at all of the events of the last few years. The Wuhan virus pandemic, Russia's war in Ukraine, tensions in the South China Sea, and now a war in West Asia. All of these have contributed to Britain's economic crisis. Plus, it wasn't just Sunak's mess. His predecessors created most of it. But getting this complicated message across will be hard. The Prime Minister made an effort today. He posted a video on social media.
The coronavirus has hit the UK.
Putin announced the military operation just before 3 a.m.
More than 700 Israelis are now feared dead.
Russia is now placing its economy on a war
Breaking news, in a major escalation of the crisis in the Middle East, Iran has started a direct attack on Israel.
I half expected a caption at the end of that. Rishi Sunak in and as 007. Great filmography. But young Britons would probably say cringe. And that's his biggest challenge, messaging. Today, the Prime Minister visited a pub in Wales. He decided to talk football. The Euro Cup is starting next month, so Sunak asked if the locals were excited about it. But he missed one tiny detail. Wales has not qualified for the Euros.
Is he looking forward to all the football?
Not so much my bag. But,
Well,
get people in.
No, but that's because you guys aren't in it. Yeah, well, get people out, you know, there'll be people coming, it'll be good summer.
Same in Scotland. Their leader is not too happy about the election dates. He says it's disrespectful. Why is that? Because July 4th is the first week of holidays in Scotland. So my point is quite simple. Rishi Sunak cannot seem to catch a break. He probably wanted to surprise his rivals with the announcement, but his googly is looking more like a full toss. "24 hours. It's a long time to be on a flight," asked Emmanuel Macron. The French president embarked on a day-long journey to land in New Caledonia. It's a French overseas territory, and since the 13th of May, it has seen deadly riots. People have died, hundreds have been arrested. There's been arson and looting, all triggered by a controversial electoral reform. So the French president has landed, hoping to restore calm with his presence. But this crisis needs more than that. The question is, will Emmanuel Macron offer it? Our next report tells you.
This is New Caledonia, nestled between Australia and Fiji. It's a French overseas territory in the Pacific. It takes around 24 hours to travel from Paris to New Caledonia, so it's quite a long journey. But the French president embarked on it anyway. On Thursday, Emmanuel Macron landed in Nouméa. He called for peace and calm.
I know that many people suffer today from a great crisis, both in terms of their health and also in terms of finding food. So that is the priority of this visit. We will obviously look into matters such as economic recovery, support and rapid response, and also the most delicate political matters, in order to discuss about the future of New Caledonia.
So how did New Caledonia erupt into riots? In the mid-1800s, France took control of New Caledonia. That led to deep divisions between the indigenous Kanaks and the white settlers. There have been bouts of violence. But this year, the island saw its worst violence since the 1980s. 6 people were killed, hundreds were wounded, there was looting, there was arson. The trigger was a controversial election reform. The French government wants to change who can vote in the elections. They want to give residents who have lived more than 10 years a vote in the provincial elections. New Caledonia's voter roll has been the same since 1998. The power usually lies with the indigenous Kanaks. They make up 40% of New Caledonia's 270,000 strong population. But giving the new residents an opportunity to vote will dilute that. It will add more than 25,000 people to the voter list. And that's what triggered the violence. The islands are now under a state of emergency. Police have held at least 300 people. A 3,000-strong force deployed from France will remain in New Caledonia. Macron paid respects to the victims of the riots. He also met local political and business leaders and even discussed the future of the French territory.
We need to look at the whole picture and see how we can find what I would call constructive appeasement. In other words, restoring calm, the ability to find dialogue and a solution, but appeasement cannot mean going backwards. Appeasement cannot mean not respecting the popular expression that has already taken place. Appeasement cannot mean denying a path that has already been taken.
The challenge for Macron right now is to find a political solution to this crisis. Calm may be returning, but the situation is not back to normal, and it won't be anytime soon. Divisions are only rising between the Kanaks who seek independence and the descendants of the colonizers, those who want to remain a part of France. Until now, 3 referendums have been held on New Caledonia's independence. People opted to stay in France in the first 2 votes, but the third one saw very low turnout. For now, Macron's biggest priority is restoring calm. The change in the electoral reform requires a constitutional amendment, and it needs to go through the French president.
Now let's turn to the US, where a foreign leader is on a grand state visit. Kenya's President William Ruto is in Washington, D.C. It's the first state visit by a Kenyan leader in over 2 decades and the first by an African leader in 16 years. We told you about this yesterday. So this visit is a big deal. It also serves as Biden's fig leaf. Because when it comes to Africa, the US president has been found wanting. For 4 years, he kept promising to visit the continent. Now his term is almost up and no trip has materialized. So calling President Ruto looks like a gambit before elections, a last-ditch attempt to maintain ties with the African continent. But Ruto won't mind. He does like to travel after all. We spoke about this too yesterday. We told you how Ruto had chartered a luxury jet for this trip. He chartered it for $1.5 million, and great expenses like that raise great expectations. So besides possibly helping Biden with his guilt, what exactly has Ruto achieved so far? Well, as we speak, he's wrapping up a meeting with the US president. They're going through a host of subjects, from investments to debt relief. We might not get all the details right away, but let's look at some of the biggest issues, starting with the debt. Kenya is in a tough spot. It has a mounting pile of national debt. In January, it was worth more than 11 trillion Kenyan shillings. That's 82 billion US dollars at today's exchange rate. Almost 47 billion of that is external debt. And when it comes to Africa's external debt, the loan shark is usually China. In 2022, 70% of Kenya's external debt was owed to China, 70%. It's a safe bet that China is Kenya's biggest creditor. So what does President Ruto do? He goes to China's rival for a better deal.
Of course, working together also on how the United States, being the leader of free market economy, how we can have a fairer international financial system where all countries are treated equally.
That was from yesterday. Ruto was meeting with Mike Johnson, the US House Speaker. But Johnson is not from Biden's party. He's a Republican and he may not be keen on extending a hand to Kenya. Reports say he declined to let President Ruto address a joint session of the US Congress. So instead of the Republicans, Ruto is going to have to bank on Biden. The US president is preparing some concessional loans for Kenya, like a $180 million loan to develop affordable student housing. But that's not going to be enough for Kenya to overcome its dependency on Chinese loans. So Ruto will be hoping that Biden loosens some more purse strings, because who knows what will happen after the next election. And that's the debt part of things. Now let's look at the investments. Ruto and Biden met business leaders at the White House yesterday. Biden was all praise for technological innovation in Kenya.
Nowhere is it more important than in the realm of innovation. That's why we have so many business leaders around this table. From Silicon Valley to Silicon Savannah, our people have brought us forward and they've pioneered new technologies that are transforming millions of lives.
From Silicon Valley to Silicon Savannah, Biden was basically trying to sell Kenya as an investment destination. It seems to have worked. Yesterday, Microsoft announced a $1 billion investment in Kenya. This is to build a data center. Another American giant, Coca-Cola, says it will invest $175 million over the next 5 years. So Ruto seems to have concluded some investment deals, and more announcements may follow. There are other things that were on the agenda, like security in East Africa, where the Al-Shabaab terrorist group has been a menace for years, or troop deployments in Haiti, the Caribbean nation that is reeling under gang violence. Ruto and Biden had a lot to discuss, and we'll see the results in the days and weeks to come. Our next story is from Thailand, where the Prime Minister may soon be ousted. That's Prime Minister Srettha Thavisin. He is under scrutiny by Thailand's constitutional court. The body is acting on a complaint by some senators. They say the Prime Minister should be removed. Why? For appointing a questionable minister to his office, a person who has served a 6-month jail sentence. The minister in question has resigned, but the Prime Minister is still under the scanner because he dared to appoint a tainted minister. Now, on the face of it, this looks like a good move. It seems like Thailand is showing zero tolerance for unethical behavior. But is that the whole story? Or is it a ploy to destabilize Thailand's civilian government? Our next report has the details.
This is Srettha Thavisin.
Thailand's Prime Minister. But his premiership is under threat. Earlier today, Thailand's Constitutional Court decided to put Srettha under the scanner because he appointed a controversial figure to the Prime Minister's office. This man, Pichit Chuenban. Pichit is a lawyer with long-running ties to Srettha's political party, the Pheu Thai Party. Pichit was once a lawyer for the party's founder, former Thai PM Thaksin Shinawatra. In 2008, while fighting a case for Thaksin, Pichit was involved in a scandal. He dropped a lunchbox at Thailand's Supreme Court. The lunchbox contained both snacks and 2 million baht. That's about $54,000 at today's exchange rate. This was seen as an attempted bribe. So Pichit was sentenced to 6 months in prison for contempt of court. After completing his imprisonment, Pichit continued to serve the Shinawatra family and the Pheu Thai Party. For the last few months, he has been the PM's advisor on legal affairs. A bit ironic considering his past. Earlier this month, Pichit was elevated to the position of Minister in the Prime Minister's office. But the move was denounced by 40 Thai senators. They petitioned Thailand's Constitutional Court to step in. The senators wanted both Pichit and Prime Minister Srettha ousted. They've already got part of what they wished for. Pichit resigned on Tuesday, 2 days before Thailand's Constitutional Court was to decide on the petition. Pichit stepped down to protect Srettha's premiership. But that did not stop the court from accepting the petition against Thailand's Prime Minister. As for Pichit, the court said that since he stepped down, he is no longer under the scanner. But Srettha, on the other hand, will be judged for choosing to appoint him. The court's approach may seem too righteous to some, but this is Thailand, a country that has seen 12 successful military coups since 1932. The last one took place in 2014, and the military still controls all the levers of power. Take Thailand's Senate. After all, this chaos began when 40 senators raised the complaint against Pichit and Srettha. Thailand's Senate currently has 250 members, all of whom were appointed by the military. They are effectively a rubber stamp. So it seems that it is Thailand's military that wants to remove Srettha from his post. The Constitutional Court also has a history of murky judgments. In 2022, they ruled that Thailand's junta leader turned prime minister could contest elections despite him having exceeded the term limit. The court disbanded an anti-junta political party in 2019. And at this very moment, they're looking at dissolving the biggest party in parliament, the Move Forward party that technically won last year's election. So the court's neutrality has been called into question. Thailand's Prime Minister has been given 15 days to submit his defense. He maintains that he has done nothing wrong. But can he convince Thailand's Constitutional Court of his innocence and save his job?
Have you ever tried to grab a midnight snack, flicked on the kitchen light, and found an army of tiny brown thieves? They give you a combative stare, then scuttle to make a quick escape while you hunt for the nearest shoe. You guessed it, I'm talking about cockroaches. At this very moment, cockroaches are hiding in countless buildings, hotel rooms and restaurant kitchens. They are everywhere, technically in every continent except Antarctica. There are 4,500 species of cockroaches, but in all probability, only one type of cockroach is the source of your frustration: the German cockroach. It has overpowered all other cockroach species. It has conquered the world and stood on the shoulders of world leaders.
I think you know better than I do.
That was the former Philippines President, Rodrigo Duterte, getting a taste of roach diplomacy. And fun fact, despite the name, the German cockroach is not from Germany. This moniker was a gift from a Swedish biologist in 1767, when Sweden was fighting a war against what is now Germany. Now that's what you call revenge. But since then, scientists have repeatedly tried and failed to find the pest's natural habitat. It has been a centuries-old mystery. That is, until now. A landmark study is out, and it describes the scavenger's story of origin. It all began 2,000 years ago. German cockroaches originated in South Asia, mainly in India and Myanmar. The bugs lived near human settlements. They started eating our crop, liked it, and moved indoors, where they found similar food sources. Eventually, they became household pests. Cockroaches were living the best life. They loved the food, and soon they fell in love with travel. 1,200 years ago, they hitched rides with soldiers and settled in West Asia. Then they moved to Europe. Global trade expanded in the 19th and 20th centuries, so cockroaches hid on trains and automobiles. Pardon the pun, but they even traveled roach in airplanes. And slowly they colonized the world, one sewage pipe or red carpet at a time. The health and economic cost of their spread is huge. Cockroaches are pests, after all, and the sworn enemies of humans. But you have to give it to them. German cockroaches are a testament to adaptability. No wonder they've inspired many things, from iconic books to robots.
From the perspective of bionics, the cockroach is an insect with excellent performance, and we also learned a lot of bionic mechanisms from it. Inspired by this phenomenon, we hope to invent a robot that can move that fast.
Now, even startups want to be like cockroaches instead of unicorns, so they can survive funding winters. As absurd as it sounds, cockroaches can indeed be inspirational because they are survivors. Cockroaches have hostile human roommates, whom they traumatize only when necessary. Otherwise, the bugs remain carefree, all while building resistance. Most poisons do not work on them anymore, neither does climate change. Cockroaches adapt so quickly, they've built an incredible heat tolerance. Researchers say today's cockroaches are nothing like those of the past. They have supercharged into mutant cockroaches, which is a scary superpower. But these roaches remain goal-oriented. Even in the most unnatural environments, they know how to get what they want: food. And they mix work with play. Much like ants, cockroaches are highly social. They help each other forage for food. But the best part? Roaches have built a stellar reputation for themselves, especially among us humans. Many of us still believe that these bugs can survive a nuclear holocaust. Granted, roaches are tougher than humans, but they absolutely cannot survive a nuclear bomb. Even so, that's a very cool rumor to have about yourself. So that's the Cockroach Survival Guide. Keep calm, be persistent, try to be sociable, and build resistance to hurdles. Basically, adapt like an ace. Also have a cool rumor about yourself. That last bit cannot hurt. Most world leaders know it already. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. The European Space Agency releases stunning new images of dazzling stars and swirling galaxies. Romania is finding new ways to rescue people from the mountains by using a jet suit. And in Germany, a company is turning sewage water into beer. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1947, the British cabinet approved the partition plan for India. The plan was to divide the country along religious lines into two states, a predominantly Hindu India and a Muslim-majority Pakistan. The partition led to one of the largest mass migrations in human history. More than 1 million people died and more than 15 million people were displaced. We're leaving you on that note. Thanks for watching. We will see you tomorrow.
Of the Cabinet's first meeting. In the words of Pandit Nehru himself, so along the Punjab highways, the endless procession goes on. The endless procession goes on. Men, women and children fleeing from the storms of hatred and distrust. A tragic problem, and one to which mutual tolerance is the only answer.
In central Kenya, a crucial battle is being fought for the wildlife. A battle to save birds of prey from the brink of extinction. Dozens of veterinarians are dedicated to healing and protecting these magnificent creatures. The Soisambu Raptor Center is one of the few sanctuaries providing safety for these birds. According to a recent study by a US-based non-profit organization, the Peregrine Fund, Africa's raptor population has plummeted by 90% over the past 40 years.
You can go down a road today for maybe 200 kilometers and not see a single raptor. As you did that 20 years ago, you would have seen 100. It's that obvious a decline.
In these sanctuaries, raptors may stay for days or years. It all depends on their recovery needs. The staff frequently travel across Kenya to rescue injured birds. Sometimes even members of the public bring them to these sanctuaries. At least 70% of the birds eventually recover enough to be released back into the wild. The decline in raptors is attributed to multiple factors. Vultures and other scavengers often die from consuming poisoned livestock carcasses. It's a method used by cattle farmers to protect their herds from predators like lions. Additionally, there is deforestation which has destroyed their habitat. And the proliferation of power lines also have devastating impacts. Birds frequently perch on these power lines to hunt, resulting in fatal encounters. The Soisambu Reserve is also now marred by dozens of giant electricity pylons installed in recent years. Veterinarians are concerned about the rapid decrease in some species, fearing that the conservation efforts may be too late.
Some species are on such a precipitous decline that it doesn't matter if we do put in those conservation initiatives, they will go to extinction. We're too late.
Raptors, which can live up to 50 years, reproduce slowly. They only lay one egg annually. Conservation is further challenged by limited funding. Kenya prioritizes resources more towards prominent wildlife such as lions and elephants. But how much can these veterinarians do all by themselves? They say they need full assistance, permissions and finances from the government.
The status of vultures in Kenya is not good. Of the 8 species that occur in the country, 4 are critically endangered and the other 4 are endangered. So they depend on conservation measures for their survival.
Birds of prey also struggle with negative public perceptions. Experts say vultures are seen as ugly, unsightly, dirty and disgusting. These misconceptions have led to harmful practices. Some communities also fear owls and lappet-faced vultures due to superstitions. Despite the daunting decline in raptor numbers, veterinarians still remain hopeful. They say there's room for optimism, as some severely injured birds have made remarkable recoveries. Some even return to visit after being released. It demonstrates their resilience and the sanctuary's impact. The fight to save Africa's birds of prey continues. The dedicated efforts of these sanctuaries provide a glimmer of hope. Their work is proof that even in the face of overwhelming odds, every act of conservation is vital and can make a difference.
What should be done to protect